What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Millzy, back with Hometown Commander, and we are here today to talk about the 10 cards from Phyrexia All Will Be One that I am most excited to try out. I may have decks planned for some of these. They may be leaders of their own decks, but I'm very excited for these cards. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Give me a like if you like this video, and stick around for more Phyrexia All Will Be One content. But let's get into it. Number 10, we have Phyrexia Enigma Goliath. If there's one thing I love in my spell slinging decks, it's payoffs that make tokens to either sacrifice to Phyrexian Altar, tap for mana in certain decks, or just have a ton of fun. And I think Phyrexia Enigma Goliath is one of those. Flying, Ward 3, and pay 3 life, a very hefty cost to get it off the battlefield. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create X 1/1 red goblin creature tokens, where X is the mana value of that spell. They gain haste until end of turn. What I like about this card is this seems like it could be a finisher for a giant turn in a spell slinging deck, where you're going off with Thousand Year Storm, or you're taking those big stormy turns. This could give you another potential win con if you can't do it via damage. The only downside is this is 7 mana. When you compare it to our other things that we have, Dika Fractal Mage is 5, Shark Typhoon is 6, so it's sitting up in this high-end range of permanents that do this, and this one is in red and blue, so you are harpooned into that already, unlike Dika and Shark Typhoon, which are just in blue. So do I like it? Yes. Do I think it's going to get played? To be honest, I'm not 100% sure. I just think it's fun overall. At number 9, you have a card that made me very excited when I first saw it, because this card looks a lot like a black card that I've played plenty of in Bitter Blossom, and that's Skrelv's Hive. For 1 white enchantment that says, at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and create a 1/1 Phyrexian Might artifact creature token with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. And then it has Corrupted, so as long as an opponent has 3 or more poison counters, creatures you control with Toxic have lifelink. So in Magic's history, we've seen a lot of these cards that give you a token every turn for the cost of a life or whatever it may be. Now, Skrelv's Hive I was hoping a signpost that we would see some sort of toxic token deck of some sort, that we can make it work, or we could make this go wide toxic creature or toxic deck work, because that bottom ability doesn't just say token creatures you have a toxic. It says every creature you have a toxic. We're seeing plenty of cards with toxic in this set. Where am I excited to play Skrelv's Hives? I mean, I'm hoping to play it outside of Phyrexia All Will Be One decks, but the deck I'm most excited to try it in is Vishgraz the Doom Hive. 2 black and a green for Phyrexian Insect that has Menace and Toxic 1. So Toxic, for those that don't know, says whenever players that get time damage by this creature also get a poison counter. Unlike Infect, which was poison damage counters equal to the number of damage dealt, it's just 1 per any damage dealt. It says when it enters the battlefield, you make 3 colorless Might artifact creature tokens with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. And Vishgraz gets +1/+1 for each poison counter your opponents have. So the cool part I think about Vishgraz is not only does it make you 3 tokens, but if you can blink it in any way, which we're in white, so there's plenty of ways to do that, or you have a token doubler out, Anointed Procession, Doubling Season, again, we're in the colors for those, we can get more and more tokens from Vishgraz. And the cool part is it's on ETB. So let's say that Vishgraz dies, but we have an ability to bring it back to the battlefield. When it comes back to the battlefield, it's going to give us more counters. Or if it goes back to the command zone and we cast it again, it's going to get more counters. If we return it back to our hand somehow and we play it again, we're going to get more counters. I think the deck is there to make a kind of toxic go-wide tokens list. I'm working on it. It's coming to the channel pretty soon, but I'm excited to see what I can do with Vishgraz. At number 7, we have Clever Concealment. This card doesn't look as good at first, but when you start to realize the decks that this is going to go in, I think this is going to be pretty cool. So it says Clever Concealment, 2 white. Instant Convoke, so creatures we control can help us cast it. Each creature you tap while casting the spells pays for 1 mana, colorless mana, or 1 mana of that creature's color. Remember, most tokens have colors, so they can still tap for a color mana, even though they don't have a mana symbol on them. And then any number of target non-land permanents you control phase out. The thing that I really like about this card is it's basically a Teferi's protection for all of your tokens. If you think about it, tokens we can't blink, right? Because as soon as they exile, they're gone. As soon as they leave the battlefield, they're gone. But the cool part about phasing out is they're not considered to be leaving the battlefield. They're just treated as if they aren't there, and that stops them from getting rid of. The other thing I like about Clever Concealment is, let's say we get Cyclonic Rift as a token deck, and we really don't want to lose the tokens, but we accept that we have to pick everything back up. We could do this in response and only pick our permanents, non-land permanents back up and keep all of the cards there. Or the cool part is this says any number of target non-land permanents you control phase out. We can just phase our entire board of non-land permanents out and get ourselves around that. If you get if we get Farewell or something like that where someone's taking out an entire board, Clever Concealment just phases out the entire board. What I find interesting about this card is I'm intrigued to see how often this gets played in decks that aren't token decks or don't have a ton of creatures. I'm very intrigued to see how Clever Concealment works in spell slinging decks, maybe that have white in it but don't necessarily play. They only play creatures that make tokens when you sling spells or things like that. In the creature decks that I have, like Kyler Humans or go wide tokens like Jetmir, this card's perfect. We're going to play it all day, every day, and we'll probably have enough tokens to tap to just get everything out of there if we truly need to. But like I said, I'm more intrigued to see, does this card see more play outside of that? Can this be a replacement for creature-based decks for Teferi's Protection, because it's actually going to be free for you to cast as long as you have enough creatures, because Convoke doesn't get affected by Summoning Sickness because you're paying for the Convoke with this spell and not the creature. So I'm very intrigued to see. I think this is going to get a lot of play for me, and I'm excited to see where it goes in. Number 6, we have Might Overseer, a new rare from the set. Creature, Phyrexian Soldier, first strike. As long as it's your turn, creature tokens you control have +1/+0 and have first strike. And then for 3 and a Phyrexian White, create a 1/1 Might artifact creature token with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. The thing that really intrigues me about this card is, one, it's a soldier, which I feel like is going to come into a lot of handy with the Mural and the Harbin lists that are running around for all those soldier mechanics. Although it doesn't make soldier tokens, remember that both Mural and Harbin care about attacking with a wide board of creatures, and both of them are in a tribe like soldiers that makes a lot of tokens anyway. But where I'm intrigued to see is does Might Overseer work in my Jetmir deck? Does it work in some of those decks that go wide with tokens? Can it still function in those? I'm also kind of intrigued to see if this card could work in a Winota deck or something like that. Can it actually firmly fit in that deck, or does it just look good? I mean, I think this fits in this idea of this Vishkraz deck, but the question is, can it get play in those decks outside of those? And that's what I'm most intrigued to see. At number 5, this card is probably the one card in this list that I looked at and I thought they shouldn't have made this. It's not number 1 in this list because there are cards above this on this list that I feel like are literal auto includes in decks that I have, and so they have to fit above this. But we have Nissa, Ascended Animus, a 7-mana, 7-loyalty planeswalker that 2 of those mana pips can be casted with Phyrexian mana or 2 life. And if you do, they come down with 2 fewer loyalty counters, so it can come down for 5 mana and 4 life as a 5 loyalty. But I think more often than not with Nissa, you want to pay all 7 because her abilities get immediately better. Number 1, you +1 and immediately get an 8/8 Phyrexian Horror, which is great. If that's the minimum you can do for 8 mana in any deck that cares about doubling or anything like that, I feel like that's going to be good. -1 can destroy a target artifact or enchantment, although I think that's going to end up on a later turn. The thing I think this is the most interesting for is it's -7. Until end of turn, creatures you control get +1/+1 for each forest you control and gain trample. In a mono-green creature deck that does halfway decent on getting lands down, I'm talking Azusa, most big mono-green decks, Selvala probably gets there. This will be better than a Craterhoof because Craterhoof relies on the amount of creatures you have down. If you dump Craterhoof into an empty board, it doesn't matter. I think the thing about Nissa that seems really interesting is, sure, there's going to get to a point where if you have a lot less lands than you have creatures, sure, Craterhoof is better. But I think more often than not, Nissa is going to be if just as good, if not better, in certain scenarios. Because if you're just dumping forest on the battlefield, these mono green landfall decks like Asusa and Titania, where they're just dumping forest onto the battlefield, you're going to outclass Craterhoof very quickly for 7 mana. And I think this is going to be the finisher that everyone really wants. I mean, you have all the other finishers in a mono green deck, but I think this is cool because if you don't need that -7 right away, you tick it up, you get the token and even do it next turn. But if you do need it, this is a 7 mana finisher, just like Craterhoof. No, it's not searchable like Craterhoof is off certain effects, but I think Nissa fits a similar role, and I'm interested to play this in my mono green style lists and see, does this work the way I want it to. The other cool part about this is if you're playing Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth in any of your lists and you can get it out consistently, this can make any of your 2 or 3 or 4 color decks have as equally as good as a finisher, because remember that Yavimaya will turn all your lands into forests as well. Number 4, we have what I didn't expect to see, even though, of course, once we saw Morrow's teaser, we knew that we were getting a Phyrexian dinosaur. I just didn't know what that was going to be. I didn't know that it was going to be Tyrannix Rex. 4 green for a Phyrexian dinosaur that has this spell can't be countered, Trample, Ward 4, Haste, and Toxic 4, and it's an 8/8 for 7 mana. This is probably one of the single best green dinosaurs we've ever gotten. I think this ranks up there with Galta. This ranks up there with Carnage Tyrant in just how good they are for the cost they are. I think Tyrannix Rex is immediately one of the best dinosaurs in your Gishath decks or your Zakama decks. But I'm really intrigued to see, what does this card do in a mono green deck that isn't a dinosaur deck? Can this get the same playability that a Galta does in a mono green deck? And I think the answer is yes, because this is an absolute force. In my Goreclaw deck, this comes down for 6 mana instead of 8, and it immediately has haste and can put in good work. And some of my other lists that care about big green creatures, this is just as good as other creatures that are in there now. And the fact that it can't be countered, I think, is an added bonus. I'm very intrigued to see where Tyrannix Rex gets played. It probably will only be relocated in Commander to those big green creature decks, or the creature decks that have green that can use this, Xenagos, things like that, are going to love a card like this because it just comes with a ton of upside. But I really am intrigued to see where this card gets played elsewhere. I think it's going to be a trap for some decks, but I think for the creature decks that can use it, this card is going to be a house. And I'm very excited to smash my opponent's face in with it. And number 3, we have a card that got spoiled very late in the spoiler season. And at first read, I didn't really quite grasp where my original thought was, but the more I read it, the more I realized this goes right into a deck that I play, and that's All Will Be One. They said the name of this movie. Enchantment, you may put 1 or more counters. Whenever you put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, All Will Be One deals that much damage to target opponent, creature an opponent controls, or planeswalker an opponent controls. Well, first off, if you're playing any sort of +1/+1 counters deck or any sort of counters deck and you're in red, I think this is an auto-include. I mean, I guess there's a question mark in the end because it's going to depend on how many tokens counters you're laying out. If you're in a red deck that cares about poison counters, something like that, you have that. But the place that this goes for me is in my Tyranids list, and the reason is because this actually perfectly combos with the Red Terror. The Red Terror says whenever a red source you control deals damage to 1 or more permanents or players, put a +1/+1 counter on the Red Terror. So basically, you just need to put a counter on anything. You need to have this and the Red Terror out. You need to put a counter on literally anything else. Within that Tyranid list, it's not hard at all. Magus, my commander, does it itself. There's a lot of creatures that come in and do it. This will see it, dealing that amount of damage. Red Terror will see it, put a counter on itself. All that be one will see that counter come down, deal another damage, and you will now have an effective loop that will kill all of your opponents. So I love it. I can't wait to toss this into Magus, see how efficiently I can get it or use it as a combo in the deck. But I also just think all that be one will be great in that deck because when you're copying Expel creatures that come in with 8 or 9 counters on it, now you're distributing that damage out, and it's helping you even if you can't attack through. So I think this card is pretty cool, and I can't wait to try it in that list. At number 2, we have White Sun Zenith. And when I first saw this card, I thought this was going to be number 1. I'll be 100% honest, because I love token decks. If you haven't figured anything about me yet, if you haven't watched many decks on my channel, I love my token decks. And a White Sun Zenith is an even better Martial Coup, which is one of the best token generators in my opinion because it wipes the board. The best part about this card is for 7 mana into a board where I have no creatures invested, I get 5 creatures and nuke the entire board of creatures, and now I'm at an advantage. The best part with White Sun Zenith is you also gain 5 life and you get those tokens. So you're getting life on top of the tokens you were already getting. Under 5, you just make the tokens, this is just as good as another generator of this type. I just think most token decks want a second copy of Martial Coup. Anything that you get that both makes tokens and does something else is a good thing, right? Like Grand Crescendo, like we got in Capenna, where it makes citizen tokens and then gives all your creatures indestructible. If you don't have extra mana, it's a board protector, but if you have extra mana, you're getting a plus side to your thing. And so I think White Sun Zenith does exactly that. I think this will see exactly as much play as Martial Coup. The only difference will be Martial Coup makes a different type of token. So if Martial Coup makes the type of token you need for your deck, well, obviously you're probably going to reach for Martial Coup first or White Sun Zenith. But I think for any deck like a Marneus Calgar or any deck that just cares about tokens in general, like your green-white tokens list that don't really care what type the tokens are, they just want the tokens, I think they will still happily play this card, and they will be happy to have 2 copies of Martial Coup in their deck. So I'm very excited to play this. This goes into a couple lists I'm working on. The Vishgraz list, of course, because it makes those Might tokens with Toxic 1. But I think this sees play in Jetmir. I think this sees play in some other decks that I'm working on. So I'm very excited to play this one. And then at number 1, the card that when I saw Marrow's teaser and a card that said that basically had Anointed Processions effect as a card text, I was very intrigued to see what that was going to be, and we have seen it. Mondrak Glory Dominus, 2 white, so the same cost as Anointed Procession. You get a creature that says if 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. So here we are, we have Anointed Procession on a creature, so now your deck can play 2 of them, and then its second ability for 1 and double Phyrexian white mana, sacrifice 2 other artifacts or creatures, put an indestructible counter on Mondrak Glory Dominus. So for 3 mana and sacrificing 2 other creatures, which in any token deck where you're using Mondrak, you're going to have plenty of, and you should have the mana to pay for this without paying for life. You're going to give Mondrak Dominus indestructible, meaning the only way it's going to get removed off the battlefield at that point is exile removal, bouncing back to the hand, different things like that. But I think Mondrak will get a ton of play. You see here on Scryfield that it's already pre-ordering for $40, and I'm not surprised at all. I think this will be a great mono-white tokens commander in its own right. I'm kind of intrigued to see what we can do to build Mondrak that way. I think this fits into every white token deck that exists because a second copy of Anointed Procession just pushes you even further. I think the place that would be the most interesting is in green-white or green-white X token decks where you have access to Doubling Season, Mondrak, and Anointed Procession, and now you have 3 cards in that deck that double the amount of tokens you make. I am very intrigued to see where Mondrak fits its way into my decks, where it fits it into the meta, and I can't wait to see a couple Mondraks out on the table. And all of these printings, especially this fresh, the oil foil, all the art looks really cool for this set. I can't wait to see the different arts that show up, and I definitely will be picking up a completed bundle because I think some of these mythics are going to look gorgeous in their alternate arts. But what do you guys think? What are the cards you're most excited for from Phyrexia LB1? Let me know down in the comments. Subscribe if you want to see some Phyrexia LB1 decks on the way, and Mondrak will be getting a deck coming up. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you next time.